Hi, everyone. I'm Carlota Pico from the Content Mix, and I'm excited to be here today with Michelle Keomany, who is Global Social Media Manager at Pernod Ricard and has over 10 years of experience in marketing and communications. Welcome, Michelle, and thank you so much for joining us today.
Hi, Carlotta. Thanks for having me. Good to be here.
It's our pleasure. Michelle, let's jump straight into the interview. To get this interview started off, I'd like to learn a little bit about your background, your company, and how you got into your current role.
I actually have a kind of a long career within content, but it's kind of evolved along the way. I started as a radio copywriter. I worked in regional Australia. I'm Australian from my accent, as you might be able to hear. From there, after 6.5 years in radio, I realized that radio is an industry that doesn't change that much, and I was really wanting something new after that time frame. So I realized that during that time, it was kind of the very beginnings of social media and digital advertising. So every time we were doing radio campaigns, there was always be an integrated element. And so I kind of followed that into digital. And then from there, I was a kind of a content writer, like purely more writer. And then all of a sudden, one day, my title was changed to content strategist, but it was still essentially the same job. So I was kind of agency side, doing a lot of UX website type work. Then from there, I decided, I didn't decide, my mum suggested that I should do my master's in advertising because why not? And it turned out to be a really good move. I really enjoyed learning, doing my master's. And then from there, I was asked to teach an undergraduate of advertising. So it was a very kind of copywriter heavy side. But then day to day, I was doing more UX content. So it was kind of a nice way to do both sides of the areas of content that I'm kind of most interested in. And then I kind of went more into the UX side. I was working I was the UX content strategist within a UX content design team making an app. And then I decided to move to France. So, I just kind of thought it was a good time in my career to see what else was out there. And I'd kind of had a lot of success in Australia and knew that other markets would kind of be open to my type of experience. And so I moved here to Paris from Melbourne. I forgot to mention that before, where I was a content strategist for Nissan Europe, working across 7 different countries and managing their content marketing for Nissan electric vehicles. And this was a really interesting project for me. It was never to do with selling cars. It was more to do with creating content about how cities are changing and how electric vehicles kind of fit into your lives and how, different kind of policies and regulations between countries that were changing, which was really interesting for me. And then from there, I got headhunted to take on this role at Pernod Ricard, where I am the global social media manager for our corporate communications, which means that I do the full corporate strategy for how we communicate across social media globally.
Okay, okay. Thank you for that introduction. I mean, you moved from Australia to Paris. What was that like?
Yeah.
Of course, for our audience who's also thinking about perhaps one day making a career move.
Yeah. Honestly, it was really exciting for me. I did it in a very naive way. I didn't speak much French at all beyond what I learned in high school, but I really enjoyed the language. And the other thing is too, I'd actually never been to France for longer than 4 days to see the Eiffel Tower in Paris. I didn't know anything about the city, so it was really a very naive but also exciting type of decision to make. And and I was very lucky to find roles that suited me when I arrived because I had such strong experience, and I think that was kind of the thing of, a lot of people move overseas in their 20s and they do it younger and, backpack or kind of do more casual work. But this was kind of more suited to me and finding something that was kind of more established and doing it that way.
What about the cultural nuances? I mean, Australia is a completely different market than France, obviously. And I mean, just continent-wise, they're on completely different continents. So there must have been a lot of cultural nuances when it came to content development.
Oh, totally. And I think the biggest one for me was because I was immediately working across 7 countries. It was really getting to know each of the different markets, and then also knowing that anything we wrote English was the language for Nissan because they're a Japanese company, which was quite lucky for me because if it was French, my French was nowhere near good enough yet. So it was just keeping in mind that things had to be translated and that the meaning can change a lot. So, for example, if we're doing tweets in English and French, it's never going to fit in German because there's so many, everything's so much longer. So it was small things like that. And also, like, I was very lucky to work in a very international team because we serviced Nissan from Paris. We had trilingual teams who worked with each local market. So they were kind of my kind of go-to people to speak to for the content and what would resonate with those markets. So that was a really interesting thing to do and something that I would never have been able to do working in Australia, where you just work on brands that, that only have to do with that one country.
Okay, very interesting. So I do want to focus a little bit more on Pernod Ricard. Excuse me for my pronunciation. My French isn't
No,
that
that's
great.
totally fine. That's
I
fine.
did study. I actually studied abroad in Paris and spent several years learning French, but that was a long time ago now.
It's not an easy language, I do have to say, so no worries.
Okay, well, Pernod Ricard for our audience is a parent company to several portfolio brands like Absolute Vodka, Ballantine's Whiskey, and Malibu Rum. On top of its international brands, Pernod Ricard also owns local strategic brands, which from a campaign perspective would require localized content also, I understand. So therefore, could you walk me through how this is structured into your social media pages?
So basically, we're actually a decentralized company, which means that our brands operate completely separate to us as HQ, or as kind of the central hub. That's one of the things that makes the company so strong, is that even though we're still one big Pernod Ricard family, you still have the freedom to do things how you see fit and what works for your brand. Especially kind of with so many changes recently with, for example, through COVID, obviously, every country has been different and every brand has had kind of different reactions to things. So it is very interesting to see that, because we are starting to work together more, but it's still not, for example, I can't tell them what to do and they won't tell me what to do. But we will kind of work together when it comes to sharing knowledge and keeping each other, in the loop with what we're all doing and how we can all kind of work together. So it's a kind of a nice blend with those types of things. And then I think that's one of the things that I like most. Or for example, for me, was I communicate as Pernod Ricard globally. When I want to speak from our global voice, if I'm talking about Absolute, for example, I always want to keep that connection between Absolute and Pernod Ricard, because otherwise we end up just kind of promoting our brands all the time and not ourselves as the group, because that's one of the things that we're not a well-known parent company. We have heaps of well-known brands, but us as a company, we're really working on how we kind of become more famous for what we do, I guess, and how we bring together all of these great things that our brands are doing and show how we all work together, because we've spent so long pushing our brands, because that's what the consumer sees. But from my perspective, I want people to know us in the same breath as when they speak about our brands as well.
Okay, that's extremely interesting. So from what I understand, your local brands are managed by local community managers who speak the local language and who target their audience according to local customs, etc. And then you manage the global brand of Pernod Ricard, and right now your objective is to promote the global brand to a global audience, but not necessarily the local brands. That's correct. So,
yes.
Okay.
Yes, kind of. Yeah, I think that's kind of it in a nutshell. Okay. It's more just kind of making sure that you see how we know when it's relevant, you see the connection back to Pernod Ricard or us to our brand, or kind of having those bridges more, kind of making those more visible when it makes sense, basically. Or, for example, sometimes I just help brands out with kind of our knowledge, or kind of give my recommendations from a global perspective. Whereas, we don't always have to be pushing ourselves out. We just kind of work together behind the scenes like that as well.
Okay, Michelle, so could you talk to me a little bit more about the strategy behind promoting Pernod Ricard to a global audience? What are you doing right now to get the name out?
So, for example, we do a lot around sustainability and responsibility. It's one of our I'm so impressed with when I've been here for about a year now, and every time we are really kind of pushing, we've kind of been the leaders in a lot of the sustainability things before it became a whole thing around climate change. They've been doing it for a very long time. So that's one of the things that I am focusing a lot more on, and how we kind of talk more about what we do. Like, for example, we have biodiversity projects in all of our vineyards across 8 different countries, things like that. We do a lot in the space of responsible consumption, so people learn more about drinking in moderation. Things like that, those things I find very interesting and didn't know that they were going to be part of my role. So those are the global topics that we're really pushing to show that we're leading on, and how we communicate that out more. I think that's one of the things that I'm focusing more on. And in terms of more specific to social media, for example, on Instagram, we're really trying to show that we are one cohesive brand. Like I kind of mentioned before, if I post something on the Pernod Ricard global channel, I want it to look like Pernod Ricard first, and then the brand that we're talking about second. So, that came up with, I had to do that with coming up with a whole new kind of visual style, because we have, as you can imagine, with nearly 200 brands worldwide, we have so many assets flying around. And so I don't want to make more on top of that, because it just doesn't make sense. So then how do I take what they're doing, but then make it feel Pernod Ricard at the same time as it feels that brand? So I find that a really interesting thing to do, and finding that kind of harmony of how we speak together.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, that's so exciting. It must be a challenge as well. I can definitely understand how having so many different brands just all around the world can be very difficult to manage, and also to oversee, and to maintain the same style throughout the different pages. I do want to focus a little bit on what you said before about sustainability and biodiversity. Congratulations on those initiatives, by the way. I mean, definitely top notch, and I'm very happy to learn that such a reputable brand is behind some of the most important topics right now, and definitely promoting those issues to the worldwide audience. How are you measuring the success of those types of campaigns?
It's kind of just basic kind of social media data that we do. We have engagement rates. We have, we check like reach and impressions, things like that. And I think one of the things for me in terms of sustainability, I find it a really interesting topic, but it's not, the next step for me is how to make it more engaging. Because right now we tell people all the great things we're doing, but then what's that next step? How do we become more involved in conversations, or how do we make, kind of be more interactive, or things like that with the content? That's kind of the next step now that we've started communicating more on these topics, and really trying to own that and show all the great work we're doing. So, I don't know if that answers your question. Sorry about that.
I think it does. So more about brand awareness. Like the goal is brand awareness.
Yes, exactly. Okay. It is.
Okay. Yeah. It's not attached to like actual financial gain as some of your other channels.
No, not at all. And I think that's the thing though. Like we know now that consumers are really looking for brands that are in line with how they, with their beliefs. And I think that's one of the coolest things I found out when I started at this company, or the kind of the reason I wanted to work for Pernod Ricard, is that I could see that it's all through the company, the way that we speak, the way that we kind of plan ourselves, and how we even the way we kind of we acquire brands. For example, we think of moments of conviviality, which is, it's a word in English, but it doesn't really get used as much. So conviviality is about kind of sharing these moments, and what comes with that, and those moments where we come together and share kind of positive experiences. And that's how we think about our brand portfolio. It's not in terms of, we have this market gap here, let's go for that. It's of how do we kind of bring more to people's lives and meet people where they are, and with, that. And I really like that spirit that's behind it. That's our kind of, our mission statement is Creators de Convivialité, which is creators of conviviality. So yeah, I think that you really feel that throughout the company, and it's a really good vibe, I guess.
That's so interesting. I love it. Okay, Michelle. So for all of our social media experts out there, and also for those who aren't who don't have such a strong expertise in social media, I do want to talk about how you allocate your budget to your social media channels. So what does this look like? How should a brand know how much they need to spend across their social media channels?
Yes, and I think for me, honestly, it's quite easy in this role, because for example, Facebook does not like businesses or brands unless you do paid advertising. So for me, I don't focus on Facebook. The algorithm doesn't favor us. I don't have budget to do ongoing paid campaigns. So Facebook for me is kind of a set and forget. I honestly just kind of whenever we do Instagram posts, we share to Facebook, and I don't really think about it much more than that because it hasn't, community-wise, it hasn't been really growing for a while. So then for me, I really focus on Instagram, LinkedIn, and Twitter.
Okay.
I also follow the LinkedIn and Instagram of our CEO, Alexandre Ricard. He is the one of the youngest CEOs of what they call in France a CAC 40 company, which I guess is like your top 50 on the stock market. I'm not sure what it's called elsewhere. So he has quite a profile, and he's very innovative. And obviously, he does actually break the mold of what people see in like a kind of a very traditional French CEO. So we really grow his channels as well as part of our mix. But back to your question, for me, mainly I do paid on Instagram, and we're starting to think about Twitter a little bit more, and LinkedIn is just way too expensive for us. And we have such a strong community there anyway that we haven't felt the need to do a dedicated paid campaign unless there was really something massive that we would, think about the budget for that. But right now we haven't had the need. But we were using the Elevate platform on LinkedIn, which is and kind of an add-on for internal. I think it's I'm not quite now, I can't remember, but it's basically for internal staff to push out stories about us, and it helps with recruitment and things like that. But they've actually just discontinued it in its current form, but it will be coming back, we heard, at the end of this year. So we had a lot of people really enjoy that and being able to kind of learn more because we're such a big company. We're present in over 70 countries. It's, so we really are a global company, and trying to keep that together, and knowing that with my role in terms of social media, it's external just as much as internal, and I quite like that duality of it. That's something new for me as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. We use our social media channels at Bear Content as well for future employee purposes, but also for branding and company and corporate purposes. And we use different channels according to our objectives, of course. Okay, which leads me into my next question. What are the components that should be considered or included in the majority of social media marketing budgets? And what does Pernod Ricard as a B2C company spend the most money on? So I know you're also a B2B company because you, of course, some of your channels are restaurants and other types of entertainment. But at the end of the day, you have consumers who drink your beverages. So it's a mix of the two.
Honestly, for me, I have quite a small budget for global because I have so much content and so much stuff coming from everybody else. I'd say for myself, content creation is actually quite minimum, or my budget doesn't need to be that high because I have it churning around me from everyone else, which is quite a nice position to be in. And that's why I was mentioning before that my role really is to kind of shape it in the last bit, to make the last kind of leg, to make sure it represents Pernod Ricard. I think for me, the biggest thing is a kind of budget to create like that last finesse. Like sometimes if we receive elements, I'll make them into, we'll turn it into a video, or we'll do the opposite and re-edit something else to make it, say, for example, it's too long, we'll make it shorter. So I found that that's quite a handy thing to have in terms of content creation, is to make sure you have budget to make those final changes or to shape things the way you want, but not necessarily start from scratch every time. I'm a very kind of frugal content manager. I hate spending money on stuff that you don't have to. And because I come from doing things myself in an agency, I really don't overspend, or I'm a bit of a tight ass, I think, when it comes to that.
I'm sure that your management must love that you're always on the saving side of budgets. Great that you're repurposing content for other uses. Wow, that's quite smart and an awesome tip to give to our audience, especially for those on a tight budget, like startups or even big brands who just want to repurpose content for other channels. Excellent. Okay, well, speaking about budget, companies are expected to spend $120 billion in digital marketing by 2021. And I'm sure a big chunk of this will be allocated for social networks. So with that in mind, what do you think the future of social media will look like? And also taking into consideration the coronavirus pandemic, which obviously impacted every industry.
Honestly, I hope it's not more TikTok because I'm too old for that. Like, I don't get it. I'm just going to put it out there. No, I do. You know, I can't see honestly at this point. I was kind of expecting Facebook to kind of come back, but it really they just kind of seem to be going from, I don't know, like kind of issue to issue. And recently now they're talking about a lot of brands have come together to actually boycott Facebook. So obviously, like that's not where I've been focused for a while anyway, because I'm a company brand, company page. We were never, suited to a Facebook community type vibe anyway. But I've been, as a kind of social media person, I found that very interesting. I think Instagram is continuing to evolve very quickly. Like I saw that they have this new feature, which is kind of like TikTok now. Like you can kind of see with them, they have more of a messaging system, because they know everyone's chatting more. So on WhatsApp. So now, like for me, for example, I only have the Facebook Messenger app on my phone. I don't have Facebook, and then I will message friends on Instagram in the same way that I would be using Messenger, which I find really, really interesting in that sense. And the future, like I think for us as a corporate, Twitter has come back, and especially now people are craving news, and for our topics such as public policy and sustainability, like Twitter is a really great place to start, to kind of be part of those conversations and to do more around there. So for me, I will probably be more focusing there. And our LinkedIn is just so strong because we're a strong company. So that's kind of a nice kind of easy win for me with in terms around the engagement that we get on LinkedIn and that channel for us. Like that works really well. But something we've done, which is constantly I get questions about from around the globe, is that we only have one global LinkedIn page, which is managed centrally. And we made the decision to not let countries start their own. And that has actually worked out really well, I think, because it's one channel where we speak in one voice. We have life pages, which are kind of a LinkedIn add-on where they can have their own static page for each country. And then, but then I kind of see how that works well because, for example, on Instagram, we have heaps of obviously localized pages because it needs to be localized. And there are just so many to manage. So I'm just I think about that, divided on every single platform, and it gets quite messy. So, but I think LinkedIn is one of those platforms where you can have that strong global voice and represent things as it comes. So yeah, no, I think that's been a good decision in the end, and we'll kind of keep growing those as they are. And yeah, I guess from corporate communications, we don't need to get too, kind of adventurous or too experimental in the way we do things.
Yeah, that's a really important statement that you just made, that you're looking at it from a corporate communications perspective rather than a local brand perspective. So for you, it's all about maintaining the same voice on your channel so that all your markets worldwide know they understand and know what Pernod Ricard stands for and where they're going towards.
Yes, that's
Definitely. Okay.
That's the goal.
We are at the end of the first section of our interview. Before we finish up, I just want to pick your brain on one last thing. So when it comes to content, HubSpot's CEO said the following, quote, "What separates good content from great content is a willingness to take risks and to push the envelope," end quote. So zooming into social networks, what do you think separates good content from great content on social networks?
I don't know. For me, for example, one of the opportunities that I found when I first started here at Pernod Ricard is that we are actually a major sponsor of music festivals.
Mm-hmm.
And so, for example, Tomorrowland is one of the ones that we have a really strong partnership with. And I had no idea that this, apparently we sponsor 6 out of the 10 of the world's largest music festivals.
Oh, wow.
And I found out that we were going to be helping Boiler Room, kind of online DJ channel, I guess, to do their first festival. And they've been doing these really kind of underground shows for a very long time. They have a really strong audience and they've never done a festival. And we helped them do the first ever festival last year. And I kind of was thinking to myself, like, how come nobody has asked me to put this on our channel? And they're like, oh, but you can do what you want, Michelle. So, for me, it was finding these opportunities to kind of go, here's this kind of newer audience for us where, like right now on social media, if we post a picture of a cocktail or a bottle, like a product bottle, it will go crazy in likes. We get heaps of engagement, but you'll see in our insights that our audience is essentially tiny. We're reaching the same people with the same content over and over. And so to break out of that, I'm looking for opportunities like this Boiler Room Festival where we went and did Instagram stories from every night. We did these little cuts together of all the footage that Boiler Room did with our brands, because we had 4 different brands there. And the brands were doing their own communications, but about them. So I needed to bring everything together under Pernod Ricard. And this was one of those things where that's what I'm going to keep trying to do, like finding those new ways to speak to new audiences. And while my music festival content might not have had as many likes as a cocktail or a product bottle, we had a lot more of a new audience and we had more engagement. So that was a nice thing to see. Like, and that's the kind of the way I guess I approach content for our company, because it's not just about the end product, it's about the other steps along the way. So yeah.
Yeah, well, thank you for bringing a real life example into your response, because I think that's extremely useful for our audience to be able to relate how some of the talk can be transferred into the walk. Yeah. So, Michelle, we're going to be moving into our set of rapid fire questions, which is basically your recommendation to our audience. To get this section started off, I'd like to ask you about a book, a publication, or an event that you'd like to recommend.
For me, I remember a friend of mine actually started the branch of the Content Melbourne meetups just after I left, and I always followed them on Twitter to see the speakers they had and the content they were covering. And obviously through that kind of network, I saw that obviously there are other, there are content meetups in lots of cities. And just following them on Twitter and seeing what they're doing and the kind of overview of the speakers they have and the range has been really interesting. So a lot of those are a lot more UX content focused, which is kind of half where my brain is sometimes. So I found that quite an interesting way to kind of keep on top of that side of the industry outside of what I've been doing.
Okay, excellent. Well, I'm sure your friend will really appreciate that shout out. Okay, the last question of today's interview will be your favorite app at the moment and why?
Well, because I mentioned before, I'm very used to, or I prefer to do things myself a lot of the time. I kind of find after I kind of brief someone, I may as well have done it myself. So I tend to do a lot of social media posts myself. And there's an app called Canva, which which you can use on your phone, and I love it. And I actually found out recently it's actually an Australian app. And it's kind of a made for social media editing app, and it's great. And other than that, I listen to a lot of NTS online radio. They also have a really good app. And all day through work, I kind of just listen to NTS. So they'd be the kind of 2 things, my go-tos.
Okay. I actually love Canva as well. I use it and I'm a fan of it. And I met, so I was in South by Southwest in 2015. And during that time, I had the opportunity to meet Guy Kawasaki, who's one of the evangelists of Canva. And this was when Canva was just starting off. And so I've been one of the early users, and I can't get enough of it. It's a great tool.
Yeah, I just started using it. I love it. Yeah.
Especially, it saves you a lot of money as well. Because myself, I'm not a designer, so I wouldn't necessarily know how to design some of the assets that we're using across our social media channels. But thanks to Canva, I'm able to save some money and design it myself because it's very easy to use.
Exactly. That's exactly it. It's really efficient.
Awesome, Michelle. Well, those are great tips. Thank you so much for joining us on the Content Mix. It's been a pleasure to have you on our podcast.
Thank you for having me.
And thanks everyone for listening in. For more perspectives on the content marketing industry in Europe, check out the Content Mix. We'll be releasing interviews just like this one every week, so keep on tuning in. Thanks again. Have a great weekend and see you next time. Bye.
Bye.